can you kind of explain productive struggle? I
Yeah.
know. I mean, you kind of threw it out there in the question, but maybe somebody doesn't know what it is.
Yeah, basically what it is you're more or less punting your first season. Like, outside of something miraculous happening, you're not making the playoffs because most of your startup draft capital went into draft picks, rookies, or second-year players. Like, that's almost solely what you build around. And you tend to be able to, especially, your first-round pick. Then there's a guy, let's say it's like midway through the first round last year. At that point, it would have been somebody probably like Joe Burrow, who obviously can help a young team for sure, but people are very interested in those quarterbacks. So you can probably get yourself what would be the value of like 3+ first-round picks for Joe Burrow. Now, you're not going to get that because nobody has that type of capital yet, but you'll get their first next year, their first the year after, plus their second round and fifth round pick, or something like that. Yep. And so you're acquiring a bunch of assets knowing that this year is not going to go well. Mm-hmm. Think of, what the 76ers did, trust the process type thing. But in a year or two, you're going to be tough to deal with because you just had 6 first-round picks in this draft and 4 in the next one, and you build your team that way. It sometimes works beautifully. If you don't draft well, it's going to be terrible, and then you just set yourself back another 3 years to start over again. So it's fun, and it can work out really well if you draft rookies well. If you do not draft rookies well, it's not going to be a fun league.
You're going to be circling the drain for a while.
You essentially look for every opportunity to trade back in your startup draft. Like, so your first pick's going to come right around that. Like, you ideally in a productive struggle, you want your first pick to pretty much come in the third round of a startup because then you trade your first. Maybe you grab another second. If not, you have 2/3, but then you trade your second as well. Mm-hmm. And every time you're trading back, you're grabbing people's future first round pick. Like, that's the key. Like, you're not looking for like, a fourth and a fifth. And like, you want people's first round picks the following year. So you own those draft classes. So the productive struggle essentially is like you're putting and you don't draft anybody over the age of like 26, period.
Right.
No matter what. And you're just putting all your assets in youth and upside, and then your ability to draft rookies the following year.
My most dramatic one, I talked about it last year. I didn't make a pick until round 10.
Wow.
That was my first selection. But I made some good trades during the season. And I still have, a solid amount of picks. So right now, just to give kind of an example of what that looked like, at one point I had like 8 firsts in 23 and then 5 firsts in 24. But I had like no quarterback. Like I had nothing.
It's not even a starting lineup.
No. My best player was Cole Kmet. Eventually it ended up being like Brock Purdy and, some of those guys as they, played well. But I had basically nothing. But through a bunch of trades, I now have like legitimate quarterbacks. I have Trevor Lawrence and Kyler Murray now.
Oh, yeah.
My running back position is still doo-doo butter. But at wide receiver, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Michael Pittman. So I have a really solid wide receiver core. And then at tight end, I have Dulcich, Cole Kmet, Bellinger, Harrison Bryant, Noah Gray. So a bunch of like upside players there. So, and then I still have pick 5, 11, 12 this year, 3 first the following year. So it's looking like it's going to turn out really well. But
quarterbacks and receivers are a fantastic core.
Exactly. So it looks like it's going to work out, but you have to be able and willing to trade for value in the right players at the right times. And, so there's a lot of risk involved with it. But when you see some of these monster teams on Twitter, chances are that's how they got there, is by drafting really well, making really smart trades at opportune times.
It's different for every team.